Okay, here we go with the first of our reviews and critiques of the projects you've turned in. In this case, I'm going to attempt to do all of this in one setting. You can stop the video at any time and go back over parts. Normally I do fewer assignments per part just to save your time and the boredom of watching a 3-day video. But in this case, we only have 9 to do, and I think maybe we can get through that in one. And again, you can stop and deal with these as you choose. So let's look at the first one. Here we have an interesting shot of the fireworks over the city. It's a nice catch. You've got some nice spray to the fireworks. I think what would have helped us a little bit, because we've got some blown out areas in here, would be to drop the highlights a little when you brought it into Camera Raw. I'm not sure I can do as well at this point just using the Camera Raw filter on a JPEG, but we'll see if we can somehow add a little more in there. And here would have been where to do it. Come into these highlights and drop that. Now we have a little more detail, and I'm going to bring some of those whites back up just a touch. Bring up the contrast just a little. And now we've gained a little bit. I think you could have done a little better had this been done in Camera Raw, but what we got's what we got. There's really no haze in there to work with. We'll see. Okay, so now we have some global stuff done. We're still blown out a little bit in here, but it's not quite as bad as it was. I'm bothered a little by the horizon. I have this feeling that it's sinking off of this side. It's very slight. Here is a quick way to correct that. Come here to the tool that's got the eyedropper in it and click on that. And among the sub-tools, we have a ruler tool. So take that. Here's where our horizon water line is. So I'm going to grab this and run it right along that horizon line. And once I've done that, if you look up at the top toolbar, a new little possibility has come up, which says Straighten Layer. So I'll click on that. See what happens. Oh yeah, it was off a little, maybe a degree, half a degree. Well, that's enough to make us want to solve it. The simplest thing to do now would simply be to crop out these parts. If you couldn't do that, then you could fill these areas. But for speed here, I'm simply going to crop it, and I think that will work because I think actually we could crop this a little bit anyway. So let me get rid of the straightening parts. Enter and see what's going to happen. Now, where's our shot? It's right in here. It's with the fireworks. These are really nicely lit up. So are these. We've got a little bit of a distraction over here with this light, so I'm going to get rid of it. Leave this dark so it forms a real edge. Same is happening here. And the better cityscape is over in this part anyway. So I'm going to bring that in. That lets us concentrate on the fireworks a little bit better. And now we have a slightly tighter shot, but it's just a little bit tighter, lets us concentrate on the fireworks a little more. Anytime we're doing this, the difference between an okay shot and a good shot, it can sometimes be a pretty big jump. But the difference between a good shot and a really fine one sometimes involves minuscule amounts of editing, just a tweak here or a tweak there to make it work a little better. So I'm going to leave this one, and now we'll go on to our next shot. And here we have a nice view of the museum out in Balboa Park with the tower, the Carillon Tower behind it. It's just a little bit soft. If we look in on this, you can see it's really a little soft in this detail. Normally, I keep all of my sharpening till the very last, but there is an exception, and I'm going to show it to you. We're going into Sharpen, Unsharp Mask, and I want you to look at these settings. These settings came a number of years ago from one of the Canon forums when they first put in their micro lens array for the full frame lenses. And it's kind of a pre-sharpening situation. So I'm going to take that. Let's look at the difference. Here is without it. There's with it applied. It's very subtle. Very subtle. But I'm going to say okay. If I want to do it again just to see what happens, that remains there. Now I can make that even a little sharper. Okay, so let me back out of that. So now we have our shot, and we can see the detail in the facades a little better. It's a little clearer. Our only problem is we have a huge amount of black space here. And of course you're going to get that. It's a night shot. What else would you expect? Well, let me show you something with this. The first thing I'm going to do is make a duplicate layer. And I'm going to do that because I want to put something beneath it, but because it was the background layer, this is going to be the simplest way to pull that off. And now I'm going to go back to our fireworks shot. And I'm going to select parts of that. Especially this part with the fireworks. Now I really only want this, but we'll make this work. Now I'm going to put this on the clipboard, and we could go up here and do it in the edit function by simply saying copy. That's going to take that selection and put it on the clipboard. We could do the same thing by hitting Control or Command C on the keyboard. So I now have it in the clipboard. Now I'm going to go back to this shot. I'm going to activate this lower part, the bottom one. And now I'm going to paste what I had. I'm going to do Edit. Now I've got this option of Paste. And what Paste is going to do is to take that selection that's still on the clipboard and put it on a new layer above the current layer. So let's hit Paste, and there it is. If we see all three layers, you can see it's above the background layer. Now, just so I can position it, remember when we're working with layers, remember in the original demos, the top layer with the eyeball in it, the little icon here, is the layer we're looking at. The layer that's highlighted is the layer we're working on. So I'm going to come up to this one, and for right now, I'm going to drop the opacity a little, just so I can see through it a little bit and see where that fireworks is. Now I'm going to come back down on this one. I'm going to do Edit, Transform, Scale, and I'm going to put those fireworks up in there. And how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to come back to this one. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to come back to this. And I need to set my opacity back up. and I'm going to select this black. I can do that several ways in here. And over the course of our reviews, I'll be showing you all of the different ways you can make selections. For our purpose here, I think one of the fastest, since everything is connected, I'm going to try to just use the magic wand tool. What that will do is select all of the pixels in that area based on this tolerance for pixel difference. So let me try that. Well, it turns out there is a lot of variation in this sky that I hadn't really anticipated. I'm going to make one more quick attempt for this. Set that to 20. Do it again. It's a little better. I could continue this till I was blue in the face. So I'm going to try a different means. I'm going to deselect all of that. And I'm going to come into select color range. Take all of this fuzziness, which is the same as that tolerance thing. And I'm going to select this area of my shot for my first selection on this. Now you'll note I'm selecting a lot of other stuff because there's a lot of other dark here. I don't care. I'm only going to use some of this. So I'm going to say OK. And now I'm going to have to add a little to this. So I'm going to use the magic lasso tool. If you look at the icon right in the center, this is my selection icon. When I hit the Shift key, you'll see the little plus sign coming in beneath it. That means that I'm about to add to the selection. If I hit the Alt or Option key, now you'll see a minus sign. So that means I'm going to remove parts of that selection. Well, I'm going to come in first and add stuff to this by holding down the Shift key. Now, if I were doing this for real, I would try to be a little more precise with this. And I want to get rid of this part, so I'm going to hold down the Alt key, come in here, surround all of this, come back in, and now those parts of the selections are gone. I actually want to see through this window, but I don't want to see through these windows. So I'm going to get rid of that. I've got a little bit over here I can dump. Well, that's close enough. Again, if I were being really precise and doing this for real, I would keep this. Now comes the magic. I've got this part selected. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and hit my layer mask tool. And now I've got my fireworks. If I now take this layer, and the first thing I'm going to do is erase a little bit of this down in here with a soft brush so it bleeds in. Wasn't quite soft enough. Let's make this brush not quite as hard and not quite as strong. And I take this whole layer and I darken it just a little. I'll just use the exposure so that I get a little separation in here. I can play with this till that's exactly like I want it. And in the meantime, what I can do, working on this layer, now remember what's happening. I'm looking at this layer through the black hole in it, but I'm working on the bottom layer. So I can come down, hit the move tool, and I can move that around until it's where I want it. I can even put it a little behind here, and you can see that it's starting to put fireworks through those windows so you can see them. So you've got a lot of stuff you can do with that kind of compositing, and that's really what that's referred to. Okay, let's go on. We have a nice parkway scene. We could do a very similar thing in reverse. We could put a different sky or a little bit of different tone into this sky. But I'll show you a trick. Suppose the problem is the haze is so much that it's so bright. It's sometimes hard to tell that it's bright because it's not that apparent. But I'm going to pick a sky color here, something that might represent a pale blue, hazy sky, but with some color in it. So let's pick something in here. That may be a little too much. Very light, just to put a tone in there. Now, remember from our first demos, this is foreground color, this is background color. The foreground color is the one we're going to paint with when we use a brush like this tool. So I'm going to use this, and I'm going to tell the brush that I want to darken. And what that's going to do is take and paint only on those brush or those areas that are the same tone or lighter than the brush is. It's only going to darken those areas. It's not going to paint on areas that are darker. So I can make a really nice big brush here. And again, we can do it by moving the size up here. I want it nice and soft. We could also do it by using the bracket keys. And now, because all of this background stuff, the trees, everything, is actually lighter than the brush was, we can paint on that and not paint over that. But suppose that's a little too much. Let's set our opacity down maybe to 50%. Now we'll try this again. Yeah, it's a little better. We could even give the impression of some clouds in there with this nice soft brush. So we could add a little bit of life to that background sky. We can lighten up this a little bit once we've got this done. Let's make a duplicate layer. We're going to tell this to do a screen layer, which is going to lighten it all by about a stop's worth of exposure. And we can see we've got a lot of detail in here we can use. So again, I'm going to use a reverse mask, holding down the Alt key, hitting that. I now have this black icon. I need to use a white brush to paint on it. And I can start lightening that up. I'm going to go ahead and put this back to normal. Otherwise, nothing happens. And we can add our detail back in. If that's too much, then all we have to do is drop this opacity. And now we can just add however much we want to put the detail back in those bushes. Maybe add a little highlight in them if we want. So some simple fixes that make that all work considerably better using our layers and layer masks and things like that. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Wow, here we have a pretty colorful fellow. Holy cow. This is a really nice shot of the bird. The only thing I would do is you do have these nice leading lines, the perch that he's on. This is a little intrusive. So I would want to see if I can get rid of that a little bit. And maybe I can do it simply with a crop. We've got such a strong motion in that area, or that direction rather. Then we can bring this down somewhat. We do have more of a vertical shot anyway, now that it's starting to put together. So I would really concentrate on our handsome feathered friend here into slightly more of a vertical shot. Then what I might do is I want to see if there's any detail at all in those feathers. So the quickest way to tell that is to go to Image, Adjustments, Levels, and I'm just going to try to lighten this up some. No, there's really nothing there. So there's no point in trying to lighten those feathers because the detail is already blocked up. So I'm going to cancel out of that. What I am going to do is darken this background just a little bit so that it's not fighting our nice bright bird here. So I'm going to do that layer. I'm going to come down to this bottom layer. Oh, come on. I'll come down to the bottom layer, pick curves, drop my exposure on that background, say OK, go back to my top layer, activate it, look at it, hit layer mask. Now I have a white mask, so I'm going to need to use a black brush, and this is going to allow me to paint through and darken this just a little so that I can start concentrating more on the bird. I'm going to bring this up a touch. There we go. And now we can make him stand out a little bit by bringing the background down. Over here on the icon, you can see where we cut through to this back one. Now, I can go back to this one. Remember, I'm still looking at the top layer, but now I'm working on the bottom layer. And with that, if I chose, I can bring that down even more. But it's just the background layer. I'm not affecting the bird because I'm only working on the background. And you are seeing through where I used the mask to punch a hole in this. So now our bird is a little brighter amongst all that green. Okay, let's grab the next one. Well, the proverbial black cat in the shadows. I think we need just a little more contrast with this. And maybe we can do it with our standard global stuff. Let's take a look at our histogram, see where we are. Oh yeah, we got a lot of stuff that isn't really good black and a lot of stuff that isn't really a pretty good white. So I'm going to bring this up a little, and that means this tone on the picture has now become our white. That's now become our black. And now in our before and after, we've just brightened it up a bit. We could make that work even more in the contrast area by using curves. Again, remember we're working tonally. So if I want to leave those highlights where they are, bring up the midtones a little bit, like on the kitty cat, and now bring the shadows back down, I can add even more to that and give it a little more of a film look, a little more oomph to it. I would probably crop this down a little bit. I mean, this is a really cool flower. This really deserves its own shot. But we've got a lot of stuff here. Or we could simply vignette it. We could darken that whole area. We could use the burn and dodge tool, but that really has a tendency to muck up colors. So I'm going to do the standard thing I just did. I'm going to make this a multiply layer, which will darken it. Come down now and do a layer mask. Take my black brush, set it up a little bit higher and a little bit bigger so I have a softer edge to it. And now I've got a very smooth vignette around the edges where you can see this, and now it's pointing our way into the cat a little better. Okay, let's go to the next one. Oh, here we have a very nice flower shot. A few things are a little bit distracting. This is definitely distracting. This bright spot could be toned down considerably. These aren't really helping us much. So the first thing I would do is consider cropping some of this out. Certainly that. Now, if you want to leave some of that frame, that's fine. This line is taking us up completely out of the picture. So let's get rid of that. And we'll minimize this bright white thing on top. Now, we may want to darken this out of focus area just a little. Here's probably a realistic tone that it might be. So I'm going to pick this tone up. You can see over here, this is the color. Fill the brush. And again, I'm going to tell the brush to darken. And I'm going to set it way down because I don't want much of a darkening. I just want to get rid of some of that blown out white. I'm going to do it a little bit, taking advantage of the gradient. Whenever this brush is soft, the center is the only part that is full strength, and it gradiates out to nothing as it goes towards the edge. So I can use that to feather my look a little. And now we've got the flower that we're really concentrating on it. There isn't quite as much distraction, and our picture is a little bit stronger. Okay, let's grab another one. Well, we have certainly a nice ocean shot, although we do have an incredibly out of whack skyline. That'll be easy to fix. We've got our person almost in silhouette. Is that what we want? there is a story that creates. I'm not going to say that that's bad, but it is a little different than what that would say if there was detail in him. I don't know if there is any to bring out. So the first thing I'm going to do is do what we did before. I'm going to look at the levels and just see, is there any... Well, there is. There's a fair amount of detail in there. Do we want to bring that out? We certainly could. So for right now, let's deal with other parts first. Let's cancel this. First thing I'm going to do is get this thing straightened up. And I'm going to do it exactly the way we talked about before. I'm going to pick up this ruler tool. I'm going to bring it along this horizon. Tell it to straighten it. And now I'm going to crop into this a little because I really don't need those little parts. I could come in and try to clone those areas out, but I don't really think it's necessary on this one because we've got some strong stuff here. Now, he's walking this way, so our natural direction is pointing this way, but he's kind of dead in the center. To give a little more oomph to him walking, a little more dynamic movement to it, I'm going to crop in a little from the back, from his back, and let this crop more like that, so he's got some room to move. Now I'm going to do our layer mask thing and bring him back a little. In this case, rather than a multiply layer, I'm going to use a screen layer to bring up some of this detail. And I'm going to use an inverted mask by holding down the Alt key, or the Option key if you're using a mask, while I click on this mask tool. I have my black mask going. I need to paint with a white brush. I need it to be small enough to just... He's pretty dark. I want this. Now, before I start this, let me tell you, there's really nothing wrong with this. It tells one story. What we're about to do may tell a different story for the viewers. Now I got a little bit of halo around him, so I'm going to go back to a black brush. That's why I like using a layer mask instead of a delete key. Now, if I want to go even farther with this, whenever I duplicate a layer, I duplicate everything about it. So if I make that a duplicate, I can lighten him even more. Here was one layer. Here was with 2 layers. And start giving you more information about this person. Like I say, this is a different story than we had with him almost in silhouette. But if you wanted to bring him out, here would be a reasonable way to do it. So let's look at the next one. Wow, is this a model? If it is, it's a really nice model of this GT Mustang 64-65 vintage. I might have wanted to see a little more of the Mustang, and although these lines certainly lead into it, they are pretty bright and distracting. So I think the only thing I would probably do to this, I might want a little more detail in the car and a little less detail here. So I'm going to do both of those using layer masks. First thing I'm going to do is see if I can pick up some stuff in the car by making it a little bit lighter. Yeah, I can. It's a little too much, but that's pretty good. So I'm going to use a layer mask, use a black brush. This is already blown out, so it really doesn't much matter what we do with that, but just in case. can see what we've done here. Now, I'm going to flatten that, do it again, except this time I'm going to use a multiply layer. And the layer mask. We have a white mask, so I need the black brush, and I'm going to use this black brush to bring my car back and this whole area generally. So now we can make this stuff a little less distracting and concentrate more on this car. Let's see what else we got. Well, and here's our last shot. A black and white version of this happy guy wherever he is. It looks like he's in the bookstore or someplace where they're selling clothes behind. They're doing this stuff. We're a little bit dark. It's really hard to pick out data. I can't tell from this whether you blasted him with a flash. I do have an awfully hard shadow under his chin, or this is the light that's in the area. But our shot is here. It's this guy. It's not this person you can't see, or is that even a real person? It's hard to tell. Is it a mannequin? No, I guess it's real. So this could have been a nice vertical shot. Remember, here's a basic rule for you. We also don't need that bottle there. You can turn your camera sideways and nothing will fall out. I promise you. So if you really wanted a shot of this guy, you've got a much nicer one if you just crop in on it. Okay, so that's our review for the stuff that came in on time for this best shot. I did get a couple of later entries that came in, but remember what I told you in the syllabus. What we'll critique is the stuff that I captured when it was graded based on what came in on time. You've now got a couple more assignments out there, and we'll try to get to those in a little more timely fashion. Hopefully the semester is settling down a little bit. So anyway, I will see you next time. Have fun.